While the world has been dealing with a pandemic, here in Canada, we've been dealing with a second public health crisis. In the past 4 years, more than 16,000 Canadians have died of an opioid overdose. So all of this week, we're going to be taking a look at the families and the frontline workers behind those numbers, those who've been affected by this issue. That includes mothers like Kathleen Radu. Her son, Morgan, died just 4 months ago, right after his 26th birthday. He had been clean for 5 months. Good morning to you, Kathleen.
Morning, Anne-Marie. How are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you today?
I'm okay, thank you.
Before we talk about the crisis, I would love to know more about your son, Morgan. What was he like?
Well, he was a kid who wore his heart on his sleeve. He was the oldest of our three children, and he loved life. He was always looking for the next adventure. We always say that he was the type of kid that would be in the middle of Disneyland and he would be asking what we were going to be doing next. He was just always full of life and really funny, always made people laugh. He always knew how to get a rise out of people in a room. And we miss him a lot.
More part of Morgan's story is he moved from taking drugs through pills to needles, but he was in recovery, as we mentioned right off the top. He'd been clean for 5 months. What was that journey like for you as a family?
Yeah, in August of 2018, Morgan almost died. And that was his kind of crossover into using needles. And his life spiraled really quickly. Quickly, Morgan decided that, he wanted help. He knew that his addiction was out of control and that he needed to have assistance. So he went straight from the hospital into treatment in 2018. And it was a really hard road for our family. We got a crash course in addiction and recovery. And it's something that many families, unfortunately, suffer in silence because there's a lot of shame and stigma around addiction. So it's not something that a lot of families talk about. So it's a hard journey.
There's an emotional part of that journey, a financial cost as well. You guys spent almost $100,000 trying to get treatment for your son. Part of the frustration that you feel as one of these family members behind those numbers is that there seems to be no outrage, and that Morgan's story is a similar story to 80% of those who are dying of opioid overdoses.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there's so much frustration around it because unfortunately this is happening at the same time that we're having another crisis. But we have this toxic overdose crisis in 2018. An opioid crisis was declared, and we talked, back then about safe supply and decriminalization. And here we are 4 years later, and we have had very little movement. And now we have this toxic drug supply that's created an even greater crisis, and we're losing a generation of kids. And it's so sad because we haven't seen the government step up, and they've just done a few small things, but there's no long-term plan. And I would love to see this be treated like the health crisis that it is, and that there's some sort of urgency to it.
Kathleen, there is a leadership debate tonight happening in the province of British Columbia, where you guys live. What do you want to hear from the politicians tonight?
Well, I was actually just saying that this weekend. It's been so frustrating not to hear this being on the tongues of every single politician that's looking to get reelected. Again, like I said, we have this generation of young adults that are dying because of toxic drugs, and it needs to be part of their platform. We need a brave politician to step forward and start putting families first and not putting politics first. We need decriminalization. We need safe supply. And you know what? We have this great capacity for love and compassion. And as a community and as a society and as Canadians, we're very kind anyways. So we need to come alongside people who are struggling with addiction and families that are on this insane journey as their kids go through, or their parents or their sons and daughters go through recovery. And relapse is part of that, but relapse should not equal death. It just should not. And these kids should not be dying.
Kathleen, I want to thank you for being our first guest as we take a closer look at the opioid crisis in this country. Our thoughts for you and your family. I know you're still grieving your son just lost to you 4 months ago. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne-Marie.
Thanks for watching. If you like this, be sure to subscribe here.
And you can check out more Your Morning videos right here.